The early morning air was crisp, almost biting, as Emily Carter stepped onto the sprawling grounds of the National Fire Academy in Maryland. Mist curled across the pavement like ghostly tendrils, and the sun had barely begun to cast its pale light across the dormitories and training fields. For most recruits, the day ahead would be a battle of physical endurance, grit, and willpower, a test designed to strip them down to their barest limits and rebuild them as firefighters, capable of facing the worst that flames could throw at them. Emily, however, did not arrive with bravado. She didn't stride in with loud confidence, nor did she attempt to impress anyone with appearances or talk. She was quiet, almost painfully so, her small frame dressed in the standard-issue academy uniform. Her boots, freshly polished, crunched against the gravel as she walked toward the registration desk. Other recruits glanced at her curiously. A few smirked, whispering under their breath, while others outright laughed. She was clearly out of place among the burly men who seemed to tower over her like seasoned veterans, their shoulders broad, arms thick with muscle, and faces marked by easy confidence. One of the bigger recruits, a man named Brock, leaned against the wall with a grin. "Hey, look at this," he said, nudging his buddy. "Little lady thinks she can survive this program. This is gonna be fun." Laughter followed, the kind that made Emily's stomach knot with the familiar tension of judgment. But she didn't flinch. She simply continued to check her gear, methodically examining her gloves, helmet, and oxygen mask as if the world around her didn't exist. At the orientation podium, Captain James Dalton stood tall, his presence commanding immediate attention. A veteran of over 20 years in urban fire operations, Dalton's reputation preceded him. He was known for breaking recruits down to the point of exhaustion, physically, mentally, and emotionally, only to rebuild them stronger than they had imagined. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in each new trainee, lingering momentarily on Emily. "Ma'am," he said, raising an eyebrow as he approached her, "are you sure you're in the right place?" Emily lifted her chin slightly. Her eyes met his with a quiet intensity that startled him more than any boast could. "Yes, sir. I am." A few of the recruits snickered behind her. Dalton's lips twitched, perhaps fighting back the hint of a smile. He was no stranger to recruits, who spoke boldly and failed quietly. Emily, however, said nothing more. Her silence, as Captain Dalton would soon learn, was not weakness. It was a shield, and beneath it, a furnace burned. She had come to the academy for a purpose deeper than ego, pride, or a desire to fit in. Emily's father had been a firefighter, a man she had idolized, who had tragically died 2 years prior while saving children from a burning building. His courage, his discipline, and his unwavering commitment to saving lives had shaped her entire existence. This academy, these grueling drills, the scorn of her peers, all of it was a stepping stone toward honoring that legacy. She had spent countless nights training quietly, preparing herself for moments like this, when her resolve would be tested beyond what others could imagine. The first hour of orientation was a blur of administrative procedures, introductions, and rules. The other recruits listened half-heartedly, already forming cliques and alliances. Emily sat quietly, absorbing every word. She noted the safety protocols, memorized the emergency signals, and calculated mentally how she would approach each physical challenge. Where others saw paperwork and lectures as tedious, Emily saw preparation, each instruction a tool she could use to survive, to excel, to leave no room for failure. By mid-morning, the recruits were assembled for their first physical evaluation. The field was a mix of gravel, grass, and training obstacles, walls to scale, ladders to climb, and a hose rig set up for practice. Brock and his group immediately positioned themselves at the front, stretching loudly, slapping each other's shoulders, and joking about how they'd breeze through the tests. Emily, in contrast, hung back, carefully adjusting her gloves and taking a few measured breaths. She had no intention of announcing herself with noise. She intended to speak with results, not words. The first drill was a timed sprint across the field, carrying a weighted hose simulating the conditions of an actual fire scene. Brock dashed ahead, laughing and calling over his shoulder. Emily began slowly, steadying her pace. Her lungs burned almost immediately, and her arms ached under the weight of the hose. But she focused on rhythm and form, not speed. Her muscles screamed in protest, but her mind remained calm, reviewing every step she had practiced in solitude. By the halfway mark, Brock's group had slowed from exhaustion, their laughter replaced by grunts. Emily's measured pace, combined with her efficient technique, allowed her to catch up almost imperceptibly. She didn't boast, she didn't rush. She simply kept moving, her quiet determination impossible to ignore once noticed. After the sprint, they moved to the climbing exercises. Wooden walls rose like barriers, and recruits were required to scale them carrying full gear. Several stumbled, falling back with frustrated curses. Emily approached silently, eyes scanning the structure. She tested her grip, remembered the angles she had drilled at home, and began her climb with precision. Muscles straining, sweat dripping, she reached the top with a controlled, almost effortless grace. Those watching muttered under their breath, astonished by her composure. Lunch provided no relief. The other recruits huddled together, talking about how tiny Emily was probably on the verge of quitting. But she ate quickly and returned to reviewing diagrams of building layouts and fire dynamics in a small notebook she carried. While others rested, she worked. Her silence during conversation was not awkwardness. It was concentration, discipline, and focus. By the end of the first day, Emily had not spoken much, yet every instructor noticed her. Captain Dalton's sharp gaze followed her quietly. There was a strange weight to her presence, subtle but undeniable. She didn't demand attention. She commanded it through resolve, by showing up, by doing what she needed to do without complaint. For the first time, Dalton saw a recruit who might not only survive but excel. As evening fell and the recruits filed into the dormitories, Emily remained outside for a few moments, staring at the horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in streaks of orange and gold, reflecting her own quiet fire. She adjusted her gear, made mental notes of the day's lessons, and set her intentions for tomorrow. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would climb higher, run faster, and push further. And the laughter, the doubts, the mockery, they would all fade in the face of her determination. Emily Carter had arrived at the academy not to blend in, but to rise. And the world would soon see why silence could be more powerful than any boast. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon when Emily arrived at the training field. The air was heavy with the scent of dew and freshly turned earth, but also with the faint tang of fear and anticipation from the other recruits. Emily's footsteps were soft, deliberate, as she approached the obstacle course. Around her, laughter and teasing had already begun. Brock and his friends stretched loudly, cracking jokes at her expense. "Hey, Carter," Brock called, grinning. "Don't trip over your own boots today." A few recruits laughed, enjoying the familiar ritual of picking on the quiet woman who seemed too small and soft for the grueling academy. But Emily did not react. She adjusted her gloves, tightened her helmet strap, and mentally ran through the drills she had practiced late into the night. The first exercise was a timed hose carry. The recruits were required to drag a fully charged hose across the field and back, simulating the laborious conditions of a real fire scene. Brock took off like a cannonball, muscles straining, boasting loudly about his speed. Emily began more slowly, careful with her grip, her stance balanced, every movement efficient. While the others relied on sheer force, Emily relied on technique and endurance. By the halfway mark, Brock's group was already wheezing, faces red, and hands slipping on the wet hose. Emily's controlled breathing allowed her to maintain a steady pace, inching forward with unwavering precision. Each step, each pull, was calculated. Her silence became almost ominous, a quiet presence moving with unstoppable momentum. The laughter of her peers faded into anxious whispers as they watched her progress. Next came the ladder climb, a test of both strength and nerve. The towering structure loomed over the recruits, its metal frame slick with morning moisture. Many hesitated at the base, doubts and fear making their hands shake. Brock leapt up the first few rungs, only to slip halfway, landing on the safety mats with a grunt of frustration. Emily approached the ladder with the same quiet determination she carried all day. She checked her footing, ensured her gloves were secure, and began the ascent. Step by step she climbed, muscles burning, lungs screaming, yet her form remained flawless. She didn't rush. She didn't complain. She simply moved upward, one rung at a time. By the time she reached the top, she paused, looking down at the astonished recruits below. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. She would not fail. As the morning wore on, the recruits moved to teamwork exercises, carrying simulated victims, coordinating water hoses, and navigating smoke-filled obstacles. Emily's peers tried to exclude her from leadership roles, assuming she lacked the strength or authority to guide them. She allowed them to underestimate her. Every misstep they made was a lesson she quietly absorbed, every mistake they committed noted for future improvement. By midday, Emily was exhausted. Her muscles ached, her lungs burned, and sweat poured from her face. Yet, she kept moving. She practiced drills repeatedly, corrected her technique, and prepared herself for the next round of exercises. Brock and the others, noticing her stamina and precision, began to whisper amongst themselves. Some scoffed, others looked uneasy. They had expected weakness, but Emily's persistence was beginning to unsettle them. Captain Dalton watched from the sidelines, his arms crossed. He noticed the pattern immediately. Where the other recruits relied on speed, brute strength, or loud bravado, Emily relied on control, focus, and strategy. Her quiet demeanor was not a sign of fragility. It was a shield, a weapon, and a window into a mind capable of extraordinary determination. Dalton made a mental note. This recruit was not one to underestimate. During a break, Brock approached Emily, smirking. "You're going to quit before lunch, right? No way someone your size can survive this place." Emily looked up at him, her eyes calm and unwavering. "I don't quit," she said softly. That was all. No anger, no explanation, just a statement of fact. The simplicity of her reply unsettled him. He was used to mockery being met with either fear or defensiveness, not quiet, unshakable resolve. The afternoon brought the strength and endurance circuit, a series of grueling tests designed to push recruits to their physical and mental limits. They ran timed sprints, climbed over walls, dragged weighted mannequins, and navigated obstacle courses while carrying heavy packs. The circuit was exhausting, designed to expose weaknesses and break confidence. Emily's body screamed in protest with every step. Her arms shook from dragging the mannequins. Her legs burned as she sprinted over uneven terrain. Her lungs gasped for air through the heat of exertion. Yet she pushed forward, calculating each move, focusing on efficiency and endurance rather than speed alone. She kept track of her breathing, her pace, her energy, conserving it where needed, pushing hard when necessary. By the end of the circuit, many recruits were collapsed on the mats, panting, dripping with sweat, and cursing the program. Brock was among them, scowling, exhausted, and frustrated. Emily, though equally tired, was standing upright, checking her gear, preparing silently for the next challenge. Her posture, her calm breathing, and her unwavering gaze sent a quiet but unmistakable message. She would endure. That evening, when the recruits returned to the dorms, the mocking and laughter had largely faded. Some recruits began to exchange uneasy glances, whispering about Emily's quiet strength. A few even admitted to themselves that she was more capable than they had ever imagined. Emily, however, didn't celebrate. She sat on the edge of her bunk, reviewing notes she had taken, diagrams of fire dynamics, and strategies for equipment handling. Her mind was never idle. Even in moments of exhaustion, she was analyzing, improving, preparing. She had learned that the academy didn't reward loudness or bravado. It rewarded skill, focus, and resilience. That night, Emily reflected on the day. She thought about the whispered jokes, the laughter, the skepticism. It would have been easy to let it discourage her, to allow their mockery to shape her performance. But she refused. Every insult, every doubt, every smirk was fuel for the fire within her. She had learned early in life that determination could speak louder than words, that actions carried more weight than appearances. She went to bed with a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow would be harder. The instructors would push them further. The exercises would be more demanding, and the ridicule would continue. But Emily welcomed the challenge. She had survived the first day, had stood her ground, and had begun to prove that she was no ordinary recruit. And deep inside, a quiet certainty grew. The laughter of others was temporary, but her determination was eternal. By the end of this training, the people who doubted her would remember her, not as the quiet, underestimated recruit, but as the one who refused to be broken. The night closed in, the dorm settling into silence, but Emily's mind remained sharp. She reviewed every drill, imagined every obstacle, and rehearsed every movement. Her muscles ached, but her spirit was ignited. She was ready for whatever the academy had in store next. Tomorrow, she would face new challenges. And once again, the quiet woman who had arrived unnoticed, laughed at, and underestimated would continue to move forward, stronger, wiser, and more unstoppable than anyone could imagine. The morning of the burn building test arrived with a tense electric energy. Mist clung to the training field, and the air was heavy with smoke from controlled fires burning in distant sections of the academy. Today, the recruits would face a challenge that separated those who could endure from those who could not. It was the ultimate test, a simulated blaze inside a multi-story structure, complete with smoke, heat, obstacles, and the pressure of timed rescues. Emily arrived early, as she had every day since the academy began. She adjusted her helmet, tightened her gloves, and checked her oxygen mask with meticulous care. Around her, other recruits exchanged nervous jokes, some trying to hide their fear behind bravado. Brock, predictably, smirked at her. "Don't get lost in the smoke, Carter," he teased. "We don't want to have to send a search party for you." Emily didn't answer. She simply nodded slightly, her eyes calm, steady, and focused. She had faced doubt and mockery before. She knew they could be dismissed with silence. Today, actions would speak for her. Captain Dalton addressed the group, his voice booming across the training yard. "This is not a drill. You will enter the burn building, locate and rescue your assigned victim, and exit safely. Timing, technique, and composure are everything. Fail, and you fail your peers and yourself." Emily took a deep breath and stepped forward when her turn came. She entered the structure, the roar of flames and thick smoke immediately assaulting her senses. Visibility dropped near zero. The heat pressed against her suit, heavy and suffocating. Every step required concentration, every movement precision. Panic would be easy here, and many recruits would succumb. Emily, however, was prepared. She remembered the hours she had spent practicing breathing techniques, memorizing floor plans, and running mental simulations of every possible obstacle. Her father's lessons, though long gone, echoed in her mind. Stay calm. Observe. Act. Never panic. The first challenge was a narrow hallway filled with smoke. Emily moved slowly but efficiently, keeping low and maintaining contact with the wall to guide her path. She located the dummy victim within minutes, a heavy, weighted figure designed to simulate a real rescue. She assessed the weight and calculated the best way to drag it through the smoke-filled corridor. Meanwhile, outside, Brock and the other recruits watched anxiously. They had assumed she would fail almost immediately, that her small frame and quiet nature would be her undoing. But as minutes passed, doubt began to creep in. Where was she? Why hadn't the siren signaled failure? Inside the building, Emily struggled against the dummy's weight, every movement taxing her small frame. Sweat poured down her face inside the mask. Her muscles burned with exhaustion. Her lungs gasped for oxygen, and her arms trembled from the strain. Yet she pressed on, each step deliberate, each decision methodical. Panic did not enter her mind, only focus. Halfway through the course, a plank shifted under her feet, causing her to stumble slightly. A surge of fear flashed through her mind, but she steadied herself immediately. Every movement mattered now. Hesitation could cost her the test. She gritted her teeth and continued, the flames crackling ominously around her. Minutes ticked by, seemingly longer than hours. Captain Dalton's hand hovered near the fail buzzer, ready to call her out if she faltered. The other recruits whispered, counting time nervously. Brock's smirk had faded. For the first time, uncertainty clouded his expression. Finally, Emily emerged from the building, dragging the dummy behind her. She stumbled slightly, exhausted and gasping for air, but she had done it. Every recruit went silent. Brock's jaw dropped, the smirk replaced by shock. Captain Dalton, usually unreadable, raised an eyebrow. She made it. With 30 seconds to spare, he muttered, almost to himself. For a moment, no one said anything. The room, once filled with laughter and mockery, now held only awe and disbelief. Emily, still catching her breath, stood upright, letting the dummy fall gently to the ground. Her suit was soaked with sweat, her gloves blackened from smoke, and her helmet slightly askew. She was small, yes, but she had accomplished what no one expected. The first whisper of respect spread like wildfire among the recruits. Brock, fuming internally, approached her cautiously. I didn't think you'd make it, he admitted, voice tight. Emily looked at him, exhausted but composed. I didn't think I would either, she said quietly. Her words weren't meant to boast. They were matter-of-fact, honest, and reflective. She had faced doubt from herself and others, and now the results spoke louder than any mockery could. Captain Dalton stepped forward, his voice steady but tinged with rare approval. Carter, he said, that was impressive. Not because of speed or strength alone, but because you didn't let the fire or fear dictate your actions. That's the mark of a true firefighter. The other recruits now studied her differently. Emily, once the quiet, overlooked recruit, had revealed her resilience, her intelligence, and her unwavering determination. Laughter and derision were gone, replaced with curiosity and cautious respect. After the exercise, Emily retreated to a quiet corner, taking off her helmet and catching her breath. She felt the familiar ache of fatigue in her muscles, the burn in her lungs, but also a sense of accomplishment that outweighed it all. This test, more than any other, had proven that determination, focus, and careful preparation could overcome any expectation or underestimation. Later, one of the more hesitant recruits, Jake, approached her. I didn't know you had it in you, he said softly. How did you stay so calm in there? Emily looked at him, sweat streaked across her face, her eyes steady. Focus, she said simply. "And remembering why I'm here." Jake waited, sensing there was more. She continued, voice quiet but firm. "My father was a firefighter. He didn't come home one night while saving children. I'm here because I promised myself I would honor him. Everything else, the doubts, the laughter, the skepticism, it doesn't matter." For Jake and many others nearby, that confession reframed everything. Emily was no longer just a quiet recruit. She was someone driven by purpose, discipline, and an unshakable resolve that no fire, smoke, or ridicule could extinguish. That evening, back in the dorms, the story of her performance spread among the recruits. Where once there was laughter, now there was admiration and even a hint of fear. Emily had set a new standard, not by boasting or arguing, but by quietly demonstrating what true determination and preparation could accomplish. And as she lay down that night, her muscles sore and body exhausted, Emily felt a quiet satisfaction. She knew the academy would continue to test her. New challenges would arrive, more intense than the last. But she had faced her first major trial and emerged victorious. The laughter and mockery of the past days had lost their power. Emily had left them speechless, not because she wanted to, but because she had prepared, endured, and succeeded. And deep inside, she understood something profound. Sometimes the quietest voice, the overlooked presence, could carry the loudest impact. Tomorrow, the academy would continue to push its recruits. But Emily Carter had survived the breaking point. She had stared doubt, fear, and fire in the face, and walked through it stronger, calmer, and more determined than ever. The burn building test had ended hours ago, yet the energy of Emily Carter's performance lingered in the minds of every recruit. In the dormitory, the air was thick with exhaustion, sweat, and hushed conversations. Most recruits were focused on recovery, recounting the day's drills, joking about who had struggled the most, or reliving their mistakes. But Emily sat quietly on her bunk, staring out the window at the fading light, a notebook balanced on her knees. She was reviewing the day's events, noting what she could improve, thinking about what had worked and what had failed. The knock on her door startled her. She looked up to see Jake Lawson, one of the recruits who had watched her closely during the day. He was tall, athletic, with an easy smile that had been clouded by disbelief today. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, sitting on the edge of the bunk across from her. I wanted to ask," he began, hesitating. "How did you do it? You didn't panic, not once. Everyone else was scrambling, falling behind. You were calm, precise, perfect." Emily didn't smile. She didn't need to. She simply closed her notebook and looked at him. "I wasn't perfect," she said quietly. "I just knew why I had to be here." Jake raised an eyebrow, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Why? Why are you really here? Not just to survive the academy, but why really?" Emily took a deep breath, her eyes drifting to a small photograph taped inside her notebook. It was her father in his firefighter uniform, smiling at the camera, helmet tucked under one arm. The edges of the photo were worn, the corners frayed from constant handling. She held it up silently for Jake to see. "He was a firefighter," she said, voice low but steady. "My dad, he died 2 years ago in a fire. He went in to save 2 children and never came out. I was there when they told my mom. I was 15. Her throat tightened, and she blinked back the sudden sting of tears. "I promised myself then that I would honor him, that I would carry on his work in my own way. That's why I'm here." Jake was silent for a moment, processing the weight of her words. The quiet woman who had been the subject of ridicule and doubt was not just determined. She was driven by something far deeper. Loss, love, and purpose had shaped her resilience in ways he could barely comprehend. I didn't know, he finally said, his voice soft, almost reverent. No one told us. We just assumed you were, well, quiet and maybe a little weak. But that changes everything. Emily shook her head slightly. It doesn't matter what anyone assumed. What matters is what I do. Every drill, every test, every challenge, I'm not doing it to prove them wrong. I'm doing it because he believed in me. I can't let that belief go to waste. For Jake, the room seemed to shrink, the noise of the other recruits fading. He had always been confident, even arrogant, but now he felt the humility of witnessing true determination firsthand. The quiet, unassuming woman before him had endured ridicule, physical pain, and doubt, and yet she stood unbroken, guided by purpose rather than ego. Later that evening, Emily returned to her training notes. She wrote down detailed observations from the burn building test, how the smoke affected visibility, how heat impacted movement, how the weight of the dummy influenced speed and stamina. She documented her mistakes, no matter how minor, and devised strategies to improve. Each word in her notebook was deliberate, each observation a step toward mastery. The other recruits, meanwhile, were scattered across the dormitory, recounting the day's events. Brock and his friends lingered near the doorway, whispers of envy and disbelief passing between them. They had underestimated Emily Carter from the start, believing that size and quietness equaled weakness. They had been proven wrong. Emily's story began to ripple through the academy. Instructors noted her precision, her calmness, her adaptability. Her peers, once dismissive, began to watch her more closely, no longer with amusement, but with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The quiet recruit had become a figure impossible to ignore. That night, as the dormitory lights dimmed and the sounds of exhausted recruits faded into silence, Emily reflected on her father's lessons. She remembered his calm voice in training exercises years before his death. Focus on the task. Fear is a distraction. You can only control what you do, not what happens. Those words were no longer abstract advice. They were her mantra. Emily had learned that determination alone was not enough. It required discipline, preparation, and a willingness to endure discomfort without complaint. She had faced physical exhaustion, scorn, and self-doubt, and emerged victorious. But she also knew that the Academy's challenges would grow harder, that the tests ahead would push her limits further than ever. As she lay down to rest, Emily thought about the recruits who had laughed at her. She did not harbor resentment. It would have been wasted energy. Instead, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Every doubt cast her way had been a reminder of what she had to overcome. Every laugh, every sneer had become fuel for her resolve. She had discovered that the quietest voice, when backed by purpose and preparation, could resonate louder than any taunt. By the time the morning sun crept over the horizon, Emily was already awake, reviewing drills in her mind, visualizing every movement, anticipating every obstacle. She had faced her first major test and had survived. She had left her peers speechless, and she had proven to herself that she could endure. But Emily also knew that respect from others was fleeting. What mattered was her own growth, her own discipline, and the promise she had made to her father. Every day at the academy was another opportunity to honor that promise, to refine her skills, and to build the resilience that would define her as a firefighter. And so, as the day began again, Emily prepared herself for whatever lay ahead. The academy would continue to challenge her, to push her beyond comfort, to test her resolve. But she had already learned a fundamental truth. Strength was not measured by muscle or voice, but by the fire within. Tomorrow, new drills would test her endurance. New instructors would challenge her decisions. And new recruits would doubt her again. But Emily Carter was ready. She would face it all, with quiet determination, unwavering focus, and a purpose that no smoke fire, or ridicule could ever extinguish. Her peers had laughed at her once. They would not do so again. Emily closed her notebook, took a deep breath, and allowed herself a rare, small smile. The quiet woman who had arrived unnoticed, underestimated, and doubted was beginning to carve her place in the academy and in her own destiny. The days following the burn building test carried a subtle yet unmistakable shift at the National Fire Academy. Emily Carter, once overlooked and ridiculed for her quiet demeanor and slight build, had become a figure of curiosity, and now, slowly, of respect. The other recruits, who had whispered jokes about her inability to endure the demanding drills, began to observe her more carefully. They watched the way she moved, the way she thought, and the way she executed even the most physically grueling tasks with precision and calm. It began with small but telling incidents. During a high-pressure hose drill, recruits struggled to control the whipping, forceful line. Brock, full of bluster and overconfidence, tried to dominate the hose using only brute strength. The nozzle jerked violently, slapping the ground and drenching nearby recruits. Chaos erupted. Laughter and frustration mingled as Brock cursed under his breath. Emily stepped forward quietly, positioning herself with measured control. With precise footwork and steady hands, she stabilized the hose, redirecting the water flow with seamless efficiency. The hose, once chaotic and dangerous, now responded obediently to her movements. Recruits stared, mouths slightly agape, as the quiet woman they had underestimated demonstrated mastery over a problem that had flustered the strongest among them. Captain Dalton, observing from the sidelines, didn't intervene but nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of her growing skill. Technique over strength, he murmured to himself. That's what matters in the field. The word spread among the recruits like wildfire. Emily, who had never sought attention, now became a quiet center of focus. Recruits approached her for guidance, asking how she maintained control of the hose, how she managed her balance, and how she stayed calm under pressure. Emily answered succinctly, demonstrating adjustments, breathing techniques, and body positioning, always calm, never condescending, always practical. Her influence became more apparent during team exercises. One such session involved a simulated apartment fire rescue. Teams were tasked with locating and evacuating 2 dummy victims, navigating corridors filled with smoke, debris, and obstacles. Initially, her group was disorganized. Brock argued about strategy, insisting on rushing ahead recklessly. Others hesitated in the smoke, unsure of how to coordinate. Tension mounted. Emily's voice cut through the chaos, calm but firm. "Stop, we're moving too fast." "Follow my lead," she instructed. Without raising her voice, she assigned tasks based on her observation of each member's strengths, guided them through the smoke, and maintained a steady rhythm. Every decision was deliberate, every command clear. The team completed the exercise flawlessly. Victims were located and evacuated efficiently, and the team returned ahead of schedule. The once mocking recruits now looked to her with a mix of awe and respect. Brock, red-faced and panting, muttered under his breath, "She's good. Better than any of us expected." Emily, however, remained composed. She did not seek praise. Her satisfaction came from execution, from seeing the team succeed, from knowing that her preparation and focus had made a tangible difference. For her, respect was earned through consistent results, not words or gestures. Captain Dalton, observing the exercise, made a note. He had seen many recruits with physical strength, others with confidence, and even some with intelligence. Few combined all 3, and fewer still could inspire others quietly without demanding attention. Emily had demonstrated leadership not by force or loud authority, but through calm competence and clear decision-making. Her reputation among her peers continued to grow. During classroom sessions, she asked insightful questions, connecting theoretical knowledge of fire dynamics with practical application. When other recruits struggled, Emily provided guidance, explaining concepts clearly and patiently. Her ability to translate knowledge into action inspired trust and admiration. Recruits who had once scoffed at her now sought her opinion and validation. Even Brock began to adjust his perception of her. The arrogance that had characterized him earlier gave way to a grudging acknowledgement. She really knows what she's doing, he admitted quietly to Jake, who had also begun to see Emily in a new light. One evening, after a particularly grueling series of drills, Emily gathered with Jake and a few other recruits outside near the fire pit. Their bodies were exhausted, clothes dirtied from smoke and sweat, but the camaraderie in the air was stronger than ever. "You know," Jake said, looking at her, "I used to think you were fragile. Not anymore. You really know your stuff." Emily smiled faintly, humbly. "I just focus on what needs to be done," she said. No arrogance, no boastfulness, just clarity. The other recruits listened, some nodding quietly. Emily's humility, combined with her competence, made her leadership magnetic. She didn't need to dominate conversations or flaunt skill. Her actions and calm efficiency inspired confidence naturally. Captain Dalton began testing her in more structured leadership roles. During a simulated multi-rescue exercise, he placed Emily in charge of her team, observing how she coordinated, communicated, and solved unforeseen challenges. She led with a quiet authority, assigning tasks based on observed abilities, adjusting strategies in real time, and maintaining calm among stressed team members. When the exercise concluded, the team had performed flawlessly. Dalton was impressed. By midweek, the academy had transformed. Where skepticism and mockery had once prevailed, there was now a mixture of admiration, respect, and even a touch of intimidation. Emily Carter had become the benchmark for dedication, skill, and leadership. She had demonstrated that influence could be quiet but commanding, that strength did not always manifest as loud dominance, and that true respect was earned through consistent competence. Emily continued her own development quietly. She reviewed notes after each exercise, visualized scenarios, and refined her technique. She knew that respect could be fleeting if not maintained. Her quiet discipline became an example for others. Focus on the task, control your mind and body, and let results speak for themselves. By the end of the week, the recruit's perception had shifted completely. Brock and several others, once loud critics, approached her for guidance. Even the instructors acknowledged her steady rise. Emily's quiet presence had become an anchor for her peers, a reminder that preparation, focus, and determination often outweighed physical strength or noisy confidence. That night, as Emily lay on her bunk, reflecting on the week, she realized how much had changed. She had earned the respect of her peers not by seeking approval, but by being consistent, disciplined, and purposeful. She had shown that laughter and ridicule held no power over someone driven by a cause greater than personal pride. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new drills, new challenges, and possibly new doubters. But Emily Carter was ready. She had begun to transform not only how others saw her, but how she saw herself. Her quiet authority, her resilience, and her unshakable focus were the foundation of the respect she had earned, and she intended to build upon it, day by day, exercise by exercise, challenge by challenge. The quiet woman who had once been laughed at had become the standard. And as she closed her notebook and prepared for rest, she allowed herself a rare thought. The respect of others was fleeting, but her own resolve, her discipline, focus, and unwavering purpose was eternal. Emily Carter had arrived at the academy not to be seen or praised, but to honor a promise. And in doing so, she had shown everyone around her that true leadership does not shout, it demonstrates, quietly and undeniably. The day of the full-scale emergency simulation dawned with the kind of tension that makes every breath feel heavy. At the National Fire Academy, instructors had arranged a massive, multi-building scenario designed to test every skill the recruits had learned: endurance, strategy, teamwork, leadership, and mental resilience. Smoke machines filled the training compound, alarms blared, and volunteers simulated panicked civilians. Every element was intended to push the recruits to their absolute limits. Emily Carter arrived early, as always. Her uniform was pristine, her gear meticulously checked, and her mind already running through the exercises. The stakes were higher than ever. This simulation would determine leadership potential, ability under pressure, and how effectively recruits could operate in real-world chaos. Emily felt the familiar tight knot of anticipation in her stomach, but it was controlled, focused. She was ready. The instructors gathered the recruits in the briefing room. Captain Dalton spoke first, his tone serious, commanding attention. Today is not a drill in the usual sense. You will face multiple hazards, simulated fires, blocked pathways, victims in need of rescue, and team coordination challenges. Your ability to think clearly, act decisively, and lead effectively will be tested. Failure will be obvious, but perseverance and adaptability will define your success. Emily listened intently. She had faced rigorous drills, exhausting endurance courses, and complex exercises, but nothing had compared to the scale of this simulation. Her heart beat steadily, and her mind worked methodically through the plans she had memorized, the strategies she had visualized, and the scenarios she had mentally rehearsed. When the whistle blew, chaos erupted. Smoke filled the air, alarms blared, and the recruits surged forward. Brock and several others charged ahead recklessly, eager to show dominance, while others hesitated, overwhelmed by the size and intensity of the scenario. Emily moved with calm precision. She assessed the scene, identified potential hazards, and began issuing clear, concise instructions. Jake, take the left corridor. Check for victims. I'll cover the right side. Maintain communication. She called out. Her voice, steady and confident, cut through the chaos. For the first time, many recruits felt compelled to listen. Emily's authority was not demanded. It was acknowledged. Inside the simulated apartment building, thick smoke reduced visibility to mere feet. Heat from controlled flame sources radiated through the walls. Emily navigated confidently, keeping low, checking corners, and methodically locating victims. Each dummy she rescued was carefully secured and carried out without wasted motion or hesitation. She coordinated with teammates flawlessly, adjusting strategies on the fly when a simulated structural collapse blocked a hallway. Outside, Brock's group struggled. They were disoriented, frustrated, and disorganized. Emily noticed their plight and calmly guided them via radio, offering direction without condescension. Her strategic oversight ensured that even the weaker members of the cohort contributed effectively. By the end of the exercise, her team not only completed the rescue operations faster than any other, but did so with precision and minimal errors. Captain Dalton observed quietly, impressed. Emily had not only endured physical challenges, but had also demonstrated leadership under extreme pressure. Her instructions were clear, her decisions timely, and her ability to maintain composure contagious. The recruits who had doubted her were left speechless. After the simulation, instructors debriefed the recruits. Brock's team had struggled with coordination and decision-making. Emily's team, however, had not only met expectations, but had excelled. The difference was clear. Where others relied on raw energy and noisy confidence, Emily relied on preparation, observation, and calm authority. During the debrief, Dalton addressed the group. Carter, your performance today was exemplary. You demonstrated leadership, tactical thinking, and the ability to manage high-pressure situations. That is exactly what we expect from those we train to lead in the field." Emily accepted the praise with her usual quiet composure, nodding respectfully. She had no desire for theatrics. The result of her preparation and focus was reward enough. But for the recruits around her, it was impossible to ignore her achievement. Brock, for the first time, seemed genuinely humbled, watching her with an uncharacteristic mix of respect and disbelief. That evening, as the recruits cleaned gear and prepared for the next day, Emily took a moment to reflect. The simulation had tested every aspect of her training: stamina, skill, leadership, adaptability, and mental fortitude. She had faced chaos, danger, and pressure, and emerged not only unbroken, but respected and trusted. Jake approached her quietly, carrying their gear. "Emily, I don't know how you do it. You're calm when everyone else is panicking. You just lead." Emily looked at him, her expression calm but reflective. "It's not about being fearless," she said softly. "It's about preparation, awareness, and purpose. Fear is natural, but you can't let it control your actions. You plan, you observe, you act, and you trust that preparation will guide you." Jake nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. He realized that her leadership was not innate charm or physical dominance. It was deliberate, disciplined, and purposeful. Emily's influence went beyond her actions. It reshaped the mindset of those around her. Captain Dalton had taken notes during the debrief and the simulation. He understood that Emily was rare, a recruit who combined mental acuity, physical skill, and calm authority. More importantly, she could inspire trust and cooperation without demanding it. In real-world emergencies, where panic could jeopardize lives, such qualities were invaluable. Back in the dormitory, Emily prepared her equipment meticulously, reviewing notes and mental strategies for future drills. Her peers, many of whom had once mocked her, now approached her with questions and requests for guidance. The quiet woman who had been underestimated was now a source of knowledge, a mentor in all but title. That night, Emily lay on her bunk, exhausted but focused. The full-scale emergency simulation had proven her skills, tested her limits, and validated her approach. She had faced chaos, danger, and doubt, and emerged stronger and more capable. Her reputation had shifted, from overlooked recruit to respected leader. But Emily knew this was only a step, not the end. Every challenge in the academy was a chance to improve, to prepare for real emergencies where lives depended on calm judgment and precise action. The simulation had been a success, but the real test would always come when stakes were highest and consequences irreversible. She closed her eyes, thinking of her father, imagining his approving smile. Every moment of exhaustion, every challenge overcome, was a step toward fulfilling the promise she had made to him. In her quiet way, she had proven not only to others, but to herself that purpose, preparation, and persistence could overcome doubt, fear, and even laughter. Emily Carter had faced the real test and emerged stronger, respected, and unstoppable. The quiet woman who had once been dismissed and ridiculed was now a benchmark of skill, courage, and leadership. And as the lights of the academy dimmed for the night, she prepared herself mentally for whatever trials lay ahead, knowing that her journey was only beginning. The academy buzzed with tension that morning. A special exercise had been announced, one that would test the recruit's ability to respond to an unexpected and high-stress scenario. Unlike previous drills, this one was unpredictable, with obstacles designed to simulate real emergencies that could occur without warning. A sudden structural collapse, multiple victims, and simultaneous hazards demanding quick thinking. Recruits whispered nervously among themselves. Many were anxious, knowing this exercise could expose weaknesses and force failures. Brock, predictably, swaggered around, projecting confidence, But Emily noticed the tightness in his posture and the faint quiver in his hands, his usual bravado masking unease. Emily adjusted her helmet and checked her gear quietly, her mind running through strategies she had memorized and simulated countless times. She was ready, not with arrogance, but with careful calculation. She had faced ridicule, she had been underestimated, and now she would face a test designed to push her and her peers to the edge. The whistle blew, signaling the start. Smoke filled the training compound instantly. Alarms screamed, and chaos erupted. Recruits scattered, many unsure of the most efficient path to rescue victims while navigating the hazards. Brock charged forward recklessly, trying to lead by force, while others hesitated in confusion. Emily moved with calm precision. She immediately assessed the scene, smoke density, potential structural weaknesses, and the locations of simulated victims. She coordinated with her team with concise commands, assigning roles that maximized their abilities. "Jake, take the left corridor and check for victims," she instructed. "Maria, cover the rear. I'll go through the right hallway. Stay in contact at all times." Her voice, steady and authoritative, cut through the chaos. Where others shouted, panicked, or froze, Emily provided direction. Inside the simulated building, visibility was almost zero. Thick smoke clung to the ceilings and walls, and controlled flames added heat that tested endurance. Emily's training, preparation, and mental discipline became her greatest assets. She moved quickly yet cautiously, keeping low, checking corners, and methodically locating victims. The first dummy victim was heavy and awkwardly positioned, simulating a real rescue. Emily adjusted her grip, calculated leverage, and dragged the victim to safety without losing balance or momentum. Each movement was deliberate, every decision informed by observation and practice. Meanwhile, outside, Brock and several other recruits struggled. They were disoriented, panicked, and uncoordinated. Emily noticed their struggle through radio communication. Without hesitation, she directed them calmly, providing instructions and adjustments. Her team began to function smoothly while others floundered. The true test came when a simulated structural collapse blocked their path. The ceiling had fallen, creating an impassable barrier. Many recruits froze or panicked, unsure how to proceed. Emily analyzed the situation, assessing the safest alternative route. She redirected her team, quickly mapping a path that allowed them to bypass the collapse while still retrieving the remaining victims. Every move Emily made demonstrated calm, strategic thinking under pressure. Her team followed without question, trusting her judgment. Their efficiency contrasted sharply with the chaos of the other groups, highlighting the difference between reactive panic and deliberate action. By the time the exercise ended, Emily's team had rescued all victims, navigated hazards, and completed the task faster and more accurately than any other team. The field, once filled with laughter, mockery, and doubt, now fell silent. Recruits stared in astonishment, realizing the quiet woman they had dismissed had not only endured the chaos, but had dominated it. Brock, face flushed and hands trembling, approached her reluctantly. I don't understand," he admitted, voice tight. "How did you manage that?" Emily looked at him, exhausted but composed. "I focused on what needed to be done," she said simply. "Panic doesn't help anyone. Planning, observation, and action do." Her calm explanation only emphasized the contrast between her methodical approach and Brock's impulsive bravado. For the first time, even he had to acknowledge her as not just competent, but exceptional. Captain Dalton stepped forward, his usually stoic expression showing rare approval. "Carter, your performance today was exemplary. You faced chaos, danger, and pressure, and you led your team flawlessly. That is what real leadership looks like. Well done." Emily accepted the praise quietly, her focus already shifting to review notes and analyze the exercise for areas of improvement. Recognition was never her goal. Preparation and execution were. Yet for her peers, the acknowledgement solidified what they had begun to understand. Emily Carter was someone who could be relied upon in any crisis. Someone whose quiet authority could guide others through chaos. Later that evening, as the recruits gathered near the fire pit to debrief informally, Jake and several others approached her. "Emily," Jake said, "you were amazing. I've never seen anyone stay that calm while everything else was falling apart. How do you do it?" Emily thought for a moment. "It's not about being fearless," she explained. "It's about preparation, knowing what to expect, and trusting your training. You stay aware of your surroundings, anticipate challenges, and move deliberately. Panic is natural, but it can't control you. You control your actions, and you focus on what matters." Her words resonated deeply with the recruits. Many had relied on instinct, strength, or loud commands, but Emily demonstrated that true leadership was calm, deliberate, and purposeful. She didn't need to assert dominance through voice or presence. Her competence spoke volumes. The story of the exercise spread quickly throughout the academy. Instructors praised her decisiveness, teamwork, and ability to adapt under pressure. Recruits who had once laughed at her now sought guidance, asked questions, and tried to emulate her calm authority. Emily's quiet influence had become undeniable. As night fell, Emily reflected on the day's events. The exercise had been grueling, pushing her physically, mentally, and emotionally. Yet it had also reinforced her purpose and determination. Every moment of doubt from others, every laugh or sneer, had been transformed into motivation. She had proven to herself and everyone else that quiet determination, preparation, and focus could surpass all expectations. Emily's thoughts drifted to her father. She imagined his approving smile and remembered his lessons. Stay calm, observe, act. Never let fear decide your actions. Each simulation, each drill was an opportunity to honor him, to fulfill the promise she had made years ago. By the time the dormitory lights dimmed, Emily had made a quiet but profound impact. Her peers now saw her differently, not as a quiet, unassuming recruit, but as a benchmark of resilience, skill, and leadership. She had earned their respect not through words or display, but through consistent, deliberate excellence under the most extreme pressure. Emily Carter had faced one of the Academy's most challenging tests and emerged victorious. She had silenced doubt, inspired her peers, and proved that the quietest presence could have the loudest impact. And as she prepared for the next day, she knew that every future challenge, no matter how daunting, could be met with the same calm resolve, careful preparation, and unwavering purpose that had guided her today. The laughter and mockery of her past had been transformed into admiration and trust. Emily had proven them all wrong, not by seeking validation, but by doing exactly what she had set out to do: succeed, lead, and honor the promise she had made to her father. And as the Academy slept, one thing was clear: the quiet woman who had once been dismissed had become a force to be reckoned with, unstoppable in her focus, unmatched in her skill, and unshakable in her resolve. The final week at the National Fire Academy had arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Recruits moved with a mixture of anticipation and exhaustion. Instructors scrutinized every action, every drill, every decision. For Emily Carter, this week represented more than tests or simulations. It was the culmination of months of relentless effort, unwavering focus, and quiet determination. From the moment she entered the academy, Emily had been underestimated. Her quiet demeanor and modest physique had drawn sneers, whispers, and outright mockery. But through preparation, discipline, and an unshakable purpose, she had transformed herself into a figure of respect, a leader whose calm authority inspired her peers and impressed her instructors. The final series of exercises was designed to test everything the recruits had learned: endurance, technical skill, leadership, teamwork, and mental fortitude. This was the ultimate simulation, a multi-building fire scenario with multiple victims, unpredictable hazards, and environmental stressors that mimicked real-life emergencies. The stakes were higher than ever. When the alarm sounded, recruits surged into action. Panic and chaos swept through some groups, but Emily's team moved with deliberate coordination. Every step, every decision was informed by experience and foresight. She guided her team calmly, anticipating obstacles, adjusting strategies in real time, and ensuring that each member could contribute effectively. Inside one of the simulated buildings, a smoke-filled hallway presented a dangerous challenge. Visibility was minimal, heat radiated intensely, and obstacles were strewn across the floor. Emily instructed her team to stay low, maintain communication, and move methodically. One recruit stumbled, disoriented by the smoke. Emily immediately stabilized them, giving clear instructions and encouragement. Her team responded with precision, each member trusting her leadership implicitly. At the same time, a separate corridor simulated a structural collapse. The floor was unstable, and debris blocked the intended path. Emily assessed the situation, quickly identifying a safe alternative route. She redirected her team efficiently, ensuring that no time was wasted and no recruit was left behind. The contrast between her methodical, calm leadership and the chaos elsewhere in the academy was stark. Outside, Brock and his peers struggled. Their overconfidence had faltered, replaced by hesitation and miscommunication. Emily's team, guided by her steady hand, completed their objectives efficiently, rescuing all simulated victims and navigating hazards with minimal errors. Their success was undeniable. Captain Dalton, observing the final exercise, nodded in approval. He had watched Emily throughout the academy, noting her evolution from a quiet, underestimated recruit to a decisive, competent leader. Today, she had demonstrated everything the academy stood for: skill, courage, teamwork, and leadership under pressure. When the exercises concluded, the recruits gathered for the final evaluation. Instructors reviewed each team's performance, providing feedback and analysis. Brock's team had faltered repeatedly, unable to adapt under pressure. Emily's team, however, had executed flawlessly, showcasing precision, adaptability, and cohesive teamwork. "Carter," Dalton addressed her directly, his voice carrying authority and respect. "You have consistently demonstrated excellence in every aspect of training. Your ability to lead, adapt, and perform under extreme pressure is remarkable. You have earned the respect of your peers and the acknowledgement of your instructors. Well done." Emily accepted the praise quietly, nodding respectfully. She did not seek attention or applause. Her satisfaction came from knowing she had executed every task with integrity and focus. Yet for her peers, the recognition was significant. The quiet woman they had once dismissed had become a benchmark, someone whose discipline, skill, and calm authority demanded admiration. Later, as the recruits prepared for graduation, Emily walked through the academy grounds, reflecting on her journey. The laughter and mockery of her early days had been replaced by admiration and trust. She had proven to everyone and to herself that determination, preparation, and focus could overcome doubt, fear, and ridicule. Her thoughts turned to her father. She imagined his proud smile, recalling the lessons he had imparted: focus, preparation, and calm. Never let fear control your actions. Always honor your promise. Emily had done more than honor him. She had embodied his principles, transforming grief and loss into resilience and purpose. Graduation day arrived with bright sunlight and a sense of celebration. Families and friends gathered to witness the culmination of months of rigorous training. Instructors stood proudly, acknowledging the achievements of recruits who had persevered, adapted, and excelled. Emily walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Her steps were steady, her posture straight, and her expression calm. For years, she had prepared for this moment, not for recognition, but to fulfill the promise she had made to herself and to her father. As her name was called, the audience applauded. Her peers, some of whom had once mocked or underestimated her, stood to offer genuine acknowledgement and respect. Brock, standing at the edge of the crowd, offered a nod of recognition, his previous arrogance replaced by humility. Emily met his gaze briefly, returning the nod with quiet composure. After the ceremony, recruits gathered in small groups, celebrating and reflecting on their shared experiences. Emily remained composed, quietly observing the camaraderie around her. She had earned the respect and admiration of those around her, not through words or boastfulness, but through consistent excellence, disciplined action, and unwavering purpose. Later that evening, Emily returned to the quiet corner of the academy courtyard she had often visited during training. She took a deep breath, reflecting on her journey. Every challenge, every ridicule, every exhausting drill had led her to this moment. She had proven herself not only to her peers, but more importantly, to herself. Her story at the academy would become one of inspiration, a testament to the power of quiet determination, preparation, and resilience. Recruits who followed in her footsteps would remember that true strength is measured not by loud displays or physical dominance, but by focus, discipline, and unwavering purpose. Emily Carter had arrived at the academy underestimated, laughed at, and dismissed. She had faced every obstacle, endured every challenge, and emerged not only triumphant, but transformed. She had earned respect, inspired others, and fulfilled the promise she had made long ago, a promise to honor her father's legacy through courage, skill, and quiet determination. As night fell over the academy, Emily looked toward the horizon, the glow of the setting sun reflecting in her eyes. She had learned that leadership and strength often came quietly, in actions rather than words, in discipline rather than performance, and in purpose rather than recognition. Her journey was complete in one sense, but in another, it had only begun. For Emily Carter, the quiet woman who had once been dismissed, the future was bright, full of challenges to conquer, lives to protect, and a legacy of determination and excellence to uphold. She had proven herself, silenced the doubters, and earned her place as a symbol of courage, focus, and leadership, a testament to the power of quiet strength and unwavering resolve. And as the academy lights dimmed for the final time, Emily allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had arrived underestimated, laughed at, and overlooked. She would leave remembered, respected, and admired. The quiet woman had left her mark, not in noise, but in action, integrity, and undeniable triumph.